All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something that you might not think is super interesting at first.
Okay.
Earnings calls.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're going to be looking at the Norfolk Southern Q3 2024 earnings call.
Right.
Earnings calls are basically when these big companies
Right.
kind of lay out their financial results, how
Yeah.
they're doing, what their plans are for the future.
Yeah.
But it can actually be a really interesting window into like not only the company's strategy and the challenges that they're facing,
Yeah.
but also I think what's going on in the broader economy as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a great way to take the temperature of the industry and see where things might be headed.
Totally. And I think that by the end of this deep dive, you'll be able to like
Yeah.
really impress your friends at parties
Okay.
with your knowledge of like the freight railroad industry and like what's going on there.
I like it.
So first things first, Norfolk Southern has a new CEO, Mark George. He just stepped into the role, and he's coming from a background in industrial products.
Interesting.
And he seems to be bringing this like operational excellence mindset
Yeah.
to the company. I'm curious, like, what do you think
Yeah.
that kind of background signals for a company like this?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because I think it suggests a focus on efficiency, on streamlining things.
Right.
And that could be significant for a company that's been around as long as Norfolk Southern.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think is really intriguing is this emphasis on two-way communication.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
He seems to really want to hear from employees at all levels.
Yeah.
And, that could be a pretty big cultural shift,
Yeah.
especially given, some of the labor negotiations that have been happening in the rail industry recently.
Right. Yeah. It definitely seems like he's trying to foster a more collaborative environment,
Yeah.
which could be, really key to navigating some of the challenges that are ahead. And
For sure.
speaking of challenges,
Yeah.
they had a pretty major one to deal with this past quarter, Hurricane Helene.
Oh, yeah.
Over 15,000 trees had to be cleared. There were like widespread power outages, and they even had Norfolk Southern responders out there, like rescuing civilians.
That's incredible.
Really underscores just how vital of a role they play in keeping things running, even when there's like a natural disaster.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, the scale of that disruption was enormous.
Yeah.
And the fact that they recovered as quickly as they did is really a testament to their operational resilience.
Right.
But, it also highlights, I think, a bigger issue that we're going to be seeing more and more of, I think, in the future, which is just the impact of these extreme weather events on critical infrastructure.
That's a good point.
These things are becoming more frequent and more intense.
Yeah.
So it's going to be really interesting to see how companies like Norfolk Southern adapt.
Absolutely. And it seems like that resilience has paid off because despite the hurricane, Norfolk Southern achieved record profits in Q3. Yeah, their earnings per share are up 23% compared to last year.
That's impressive.
And their operating ratio, which basically measures how efficiently they're running the business, saw a massive improvement.
Okay.
And what I think is really impressive here is that they're achieving this while also increasing volume and improving service.
Right.
Which is usually a really hard balance to strike.
Yeah, it is. It's not easy to do all three of those things at the same time.
Right.
So what they seem to be doing is taking this multi-pronged approach
Yeah.
to improving efficiency. They've taken over 500 locomotives and 8,000 rail cars offline.
Wow.
Which is a big deal. That's streamlining their operations, reducing their capital expenditures.
Right.
They've also made some changes to train operations and energy management, and that's led to record levels of fuel efficiency,
Okay.
which is not only saving them money, but also reducing their environmental impact,
Right.
which is increasingly important for companies these days.
Absolutely. And then there's the labor side of things. They're moving 3% more volume with 3% fewer employees compared to last year.
That's pretty remarkable.
Which is a pretty incredible increase in productivity, especially in an industry that's traditionally been pretty labor intensive.
Yeah, you don't often see those kinds of gains in productivity, especially in a sector like this.
Right.
It really speaks to the potential of technology and just these operational improvements to boost productivity, even in areas where you might not expect it.
Right. And they've also implemented this new intermodal reservation system,
Okay.
which is kind of like booking a flight for your cargo.
Interesting.
It brings more predictability to their operations. It
Yeah.
leads to tighter terminal operations and longer trains.
Longer trains, huh?
Yeah, longer trains.
So how does that work?
Well, I mean, longer trains mean more cargo moved per trip,
Okay.
which means greater efficiency and lower costs.
Right, so it's a win-win situation for them.
Exactly. So it sounds like things are going really well for Norfolk Southern internally.
Yeah, they seem to be firing on all cylinders.
But there's always the bigger economic picture to consider, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, you can't ignore the external factors.
Right. And we're seeing some signs of weakness in the auto and steel markets.
Uh-oh.
And while the demand for thermal coal, which is the kind that's used in power plants, is strong, export coal prices are declining.
I see.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
They're doing great on their own, but they're facing challenges from these forces outside of their control.
Right. Well, it's a good reminder that even the best-run companies can be affected by these broader economic trends.
For sure. And it's worth mentioning, I think, another factor that could play a role in the future, which is the ongoing concerns about truck driver shortages.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
If Norfolk Southern can continue to provide this reliable service,
Yeah.
they might be able to capitalize on this and capture market share from the trucking industry.
That's a good point. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Definitely. So they've also made some strategic moves.
Okay.
They sold off 2 significant rail lines this year, which generated almost $400 million in cash,
Okay.
and they're planning to reduce capital expenditures next year.
Interesting.
So what do you think is the thinking behind these moves?
Well, it seems like they might be preparing to buy back their own shares,
Okay.
which is something that investors usually like because it can boost the stock price.
Right.
So it suggests that they're confident in their future prospects
Mm-hmm.
and are taking this proactive approach to managing their resources.
So selling assets, streamlining operations, and potentially rewarding investors.
Yeah.
That's a pretty clear sign of confidence, wouldn't you say?
It definitely points to a belief in their ability to navigate whatever economic uncertainties might be coming down the pike.
Right. And let's not forget about the labor situation.
Yeah, that's right.
The new labor agreements were just ratified, which is a big win
Absolutely.
for both Norfolk Southern and its workforce.
Yeah, it provides some stability, some predictability for everybody involved.
Totally. And while we don't know the specific details,
Right.
John Orr, their chief operating officer, emphasized the importance of clarity
Okay.
and what he called discretionary effort from employees.
Interesting.
So it sounds like he's aiming for a highly engaged workforce.
Yeah, it sounds like he wants people to be really invested in the company's success.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that they didn't delve into specifics during the call.
Yeah.
Maybe these agreements include provisions that incentivize, productivity and collaboration.
It's possible.
And despite all the economic uncertainty,
Right.
Norfolk Southern's leadership is still laser focused on their long-term goal,
Okay.
which is achieving a sub 60% operating ratio
Wow.
within the next 3 to 4 years.
That's a pretty ambitious target.
Yeah, especially considering the potential headwinds we've been talking about.
Right,
It
right.
seems like they're betting big on their internal improvements to kind of weather whatever storms might be coming economically.
Yeah, it's a bold strategy.
So what does that mean for someone like me who maybe doesn't spend all day thinking about freight railroads? Why should I care about what's happening at Norfolk Southern?
Well, think about it this way. Freight railroads are kind of the circulatory system of the American economy.
Okay.
They move everything from the food we eat
Right.
to the raw materials that go into the products we use every day.
Yeah.
So when a company like Norfolk Southern is thriving,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good sign for the economy as a whole.
Right.
It means goods are moving efficiently, businesses are operating smoothly,
Yeah.
and consumers have access to the things they need.
And they're also kind of a microcosm
Yeah.
of these larger trends that are shaping the business world.
Well, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, their focus on technology, automation, data-driven decision-making,
Mm-hmm.
that's something we're seeing across industries.
Yeah, it's not just about trains. It's about how businesses are adapting to the demands of the 21st century.
Totally. And it's really cool to see
Yeah,
a company like this embracing those things.
absolutely.
So I think we've got a lot more to unpack here. But we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in just a minute.
So they're investing heavily in their workforce, emphasizing training and development and trying to foster this culture of continuous improvement.
Yeah.
I think that's something that businesses of all sizes can learn from, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they're not just trying to keep up with the times. They're trying to get ahead of them, and they're doing it in a way that benefits both their bottom line and their employees.
Right.
It's a model that more companies could stand to emulate.
Totally. And let's not forget about the sustainability angle as well.
Right.
Norfolk Southern is making significant strides in fuel efficiency, reducing their environmental impact.
Yeah.
This is becoming increasingly important for companies as consumers are demanding more responsible business practices.
You're absolutely right. It's a good reminder that profitability and sustainability don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Right.
In fact, they can often go hand in hand.
Yeah. So, okay, we've established that freight railroads are important.
But what about the specific insights from this earnings call? What are some key takeaways that listeners can walk away with?
Well, I'd say there are three big ones.
Okay.
First, operational excellence is key.
Okay.
Norfolk Southern is proving that even in a mature industry like railroads,
Yeah.
there's always room for improvement.
Right. By focusing on efficiency, streamlining operations, embracing technology, they've managed to boost profits, improve service, increase resilience.
Exactly. And the second big takeaway is that labor relations matter.
Okay.
These newly ratified agreements suggest that Norfolk Southern is prioritizing collaboration and communication with its workforce,
Right.
which is essential for long-term success.
Yeah.
It's a good lesson for any business leader. Treating employees well, giving them a voice in the company's direction,
Right.
can lead to greater productivity and engagement.
Totally. And third, be prepared for uncertainty.
Yes.
Norfolk Southern is facing some potential headwinds, but they're taking these proactive steps to mitigate risks and position themselves for the future.
Right. They're selling assets,
Yeah.
streamlining operations, and potentially gearing up for share buybacks.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even in uncertain times, businesses need to be strategic and adaptable.
It's a classic example of like playing both offense and defense in business.
Yeah.
You need to be able to seize opportunities when they arise, but also have a plan for when things get tough.
Precisely. It's about balancing short-term gains with long-term sustainability.
Totally. So to wrap things up, we've seen how Norfolk Southern is using technology operational changes and this new leadership style to navigate a pretty tricky landscape.
Yeah.
They're not shying away from challenges. They're tackling them head on.
And that's the key takeaway for me. This deep dive has shown us that even in industries we might think of as old school, like railroads,
Yeah.
there's a ton of innovation and adaptation happening.
Right.
It makes you wonder what other industries could learn from their approach.
It's true. We often think of disruption as something that happens to businesses. But Norfolk Southern is showing us that it can also be something you create, something you use to your advantage.
What's exciting is that this kind of thinking isn't limited to just one company or one industry.
Right.
It's a broader trend that's reshaping how business is done in the 21st century.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder as you go about your day.
Okay.
What does the Norfolk Southern story tell us about the power of embracing change, even when things seem uncertain?
That's a good question.
What can we learn from their approach to leadership technology, building a resilient, adaptable organization?
And most importantly, how can we apply those lessons to our own work, our own businesses, and even our own lives?
Right, because in a world that's constantly changing,
Yeah,
the ability to adapt might just be the most valuable skill of all.
I think you're right.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of freight railroads.
My pleasure.
We hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little surprising. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely.
What stood out to you? What questions do you still have? Let us know.
Yeah, reach out.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Yeah, it really makes you think about like the potential for change, even in these industries that we don't always think of as being super innovative.
Right.
So to wrap things up, let's kind of try to connect the dots for our listeners.
Okay.
You know, we've talked about how Norfolk Southern is using technology operational changes, this new leadership style to navigate this pretty tricky landscape. What are the broader takeaways here? Like, what does their story tell us about what's happening in business in the 21st century?
Well, I think one of the key themes that emerges is this move towards data-driven decision-making.
Okay.
And you know, Norfolk Southern's intermodal reservation system is a perfect example of this.
Right.
They're using technology to gather real-time information, analyze patterns,
And make more informed choices about how to optimize their operations.
It's like they're bringing the precision of like a finely tuned machine to an industry that used to rely a lot more on like gut instinct and experience.
Exactly. And, you know, that data-driven approach is something we're seeing across a wide range of industries now.
Right.
From manufacturing to healthcare to retail.
Yeah.
It's about using information to gain a competitive edge and make smarter decisions.
And it's not even just about the technology itself, it's about how you use it.
Right.
Norfolk Southern isn't just like implementing new systems.
Yeah.
They're changing their whole approach to doing business.
Absolutely. And that brings us to, I think, the second big theme here,
Okay.
which is the importance of agility and adaptability. The business world is changing faster than ever.
Right.
And companies that can't keep up are going to be left behind.
Yeah.
And Norfolk Southern's willingness to embrace change, whether it's streamlining operations, investing in new technology, or adopting a more collaborative leadership style,
Right.
that's really what sets them apart.
It's like they've really embraced the idea that change isn't something to be feared.
Yeah.
It's something to be like leveraged.
Exactly.
Footage.
And then the third key theme, I think, that's emerging here
Okay.
is this growing recognition of the human element
Mm-hmm.
in business success.
Right.
Norfolk Southern's focus on employee engagement,
Yeah.
their commitment to building a stronger relationship with their workforce.
Mm-hmm.
This is a sign of the times.
Yeah.
Companies are realizing that their most valuable asset is their people.
Right. It's not enough to have like the best technology or the most efficient processes.
Yeah.
You need people who are motivated and engaged
Exactly.
and empowered to like contribute their best work.
And that requires a shift in leadership style as well.
Okay.
It's a move away from this top-down command and control approach
Mm.
towards something that's more collaborative and inclusive.
Right.
And Norfolk Southern's new CEO seems to understand this.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see how this new leadership style
Mm-hmm.
translates into concrete results.
So if someone's listening to this and
Yeah.
they're thinking, well, that's all well and good for a big company like Norfolk Southern,
Right.
but what does it mean for me?
Mm-hmm.
What would you say? Like, how can these themes be applied to smaller businesses, individual careers, even just everyday life?
Well, I think the lessons here are universal.
Okay.
Whether you're running a small business, leading a team, or just trying to navigate your own career.
Mm-hmm.
These principles of data-driven decision-making, agility, adaptability,
Yeah.
a focus on human capital,
Right.
these are all relevant.
Totally.
It's about being open to new ideas, embracing change, and recognizing the value of human connection
Yeah.
in a world that's increasingly driven by technology.
Right. It's about finding that balance between embracing the power of technology, but also remembering that it's people who drive innovation
Mm-hmm.
and create value.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on.
Yeah, so to all our listeners out there,
Yeah.
we hope this deep dive into the world of Norfolk Southern has given you some food for thought,
Absolutely.
some new insights into the forces that are shaping the business landscape,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe even some inspiration for how to navigate your own path forward.
Yeah, and remember, even in an industry as seemingly traditional as freight railroads,
Yeah.
there's always room for innovation, adaptation, and growth.
Thanks for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.